Welcome to the Pats building. This building is very much the heart of the Department of Music and Media here at the University of Surrey. And it's also where the vast majority of our facilities are. This building was built to a very high specification and was built for the purpose of the recording courses and the music courses here at Surrey. In this building, we've got 3 recording studios, we've got 5 edit rooms, we've also got lots of practice rooms and other musical facilities that you will use through the course. So I'm going to give you a tour around the building, tell you a little bit more about each of the facilities that we have, tell you a little bit more about what you might do if you come on the Tom Meister course in each of the facilities, and hopefully give you a good idea of the flavour of the practical work, the recording work as part of the course. This is Studio 1. As you can hear, this has been designed primarily for recording classical music. The acoustics in here are designed to sound as you would expect a small classical performance venue to sound. There's lots of hard surfaces to reflect the sound, and the reverb time is relatively long, particularly compared to some of our other studios that we'll see later. This is used for things like the Wednesday lunchtime concerts. So those are concerts given either by visiting professionals or by students who are studying performance on any of our courses. This is a really good exercise for the Tom Meisters in recording a live performance, which has lots of restrictions that you don't usually get in a studio recording. Limitations about where you can put the musicians, where you can put the instruments, the fact that you can't have lots and lots of microphones in the way between the musicians and the audience, because for some reason, most people in the audience would like to watch the musicians rather than microphones. I know, people are strange like that. The rest of the time, there are a few rehearsals and seminars happening there, but beyond that, these studios are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for Tom Meisters to make recordings of whatever they wish to, within reason. As I said, this room is designed mainly for classical recording, but we have the acoustic curtains around the back, which means we can change the reverberation time and dampen it down a little bit more if we want to record other styles of music. And students have recorded all sorts of weird and wonderful things in here. The space is large enough that you could record a full orchestra and choir if you wish to do that, though most of the projects are slightly smaller scale than that. But there are plenty of examples of recordings made by students which you can watch, whether that's classical music, it might be jazz music that's recorded in here. Students like to try out all sorts of things, and that's really the idea behind the practical points of the course, that you can try out lots of different microphones, lots of different equipment, lots of different musical styles to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So we end up with all sorts of different musical styles recorded in here. As you can hear, or actually, as you probably can't hear, this is a really quiet recording space. The building was built to a very high acoustic specification, so that means we have multiple layers of high-density concrete block in all the walls to try and keep the sound out that we want to keep out. And that means we can have something like a harpsichord recording in here, which would be very quiet, or a flute or a guitar, at the same time as a rock band is playing in Studio 2, and we won't have one drowning out the other. We can also link together all the studios if we want to do that. We have tie lines between all of the different parts of the studios. And so we can run a huge recording session if we want to, where you might have, I don't know, your piano parts and your string parts being recorded here, at the same time as your rhythm section is being recorded in Studio 2, at the same time as you're recording your vocalist in the overdub booth of Studio 3. There's all sorts of amazing projects that you can use all of this gear for. And the idea of all the equipment that we've got is that you can try things out, you can experiment, you can do all sorts of weird and wacky projects. The idea being as you're doing that, you're learning about what works and what perhaps doesn't work. You're gaining lots of experience of using the kind of equipment that you'll come across in industry. In terms of instruments, we have 2 Steinway grand pianos in here, which can be reused for recording or performance. We also have a large percussion cupboard full of all sorts of different percussion instruments, both tuned and untuned. And of course, most of the instruments in the department can be brought into here for recording if that's what you want to do in your recording project. At the back of the room, just through the window, we have the control room, which is where most of the recording equipment is. So when you're making a recording in here, you would position your musicians and position your microphones as you think is most appropriate for the kind of thing you're trying to record. You plug those microphones into the wall boxes in the wall, and the signals go underneath the floor and into the control room, which is just through a window at the back of the room. And that's where all of the recording and the mixing part happens. And that's where we're going to go now. This is the control room for Studio One, and just like the studio floor, which is just through the window, all of this is designed predominantly for recording classical music. So the equipment that we have in here is selected because it's the kind of equipment that you would come across in classical recording studios. So for instance, the recording console that's in here is a Studio Vista, and Studio Vistas are widely used in recording of particularly classical music, and you'll find them in places like the Royal Opera House, or Chandos, who is a classical recording company. You'll find it in places like BBC outside broadcast trucks and in BBC studios. So the idea behind all of our equipment is we are giving the opportunity to learn the kind of equipment that you'll find out there in industry. And because the equipment we have is from a wide range of types and from a wide range of manufacturers, this means that when you go out to work in your professional career later on, you have a good understanding of how to use a wide range of the different types of equipment that you will come across in the professional audio industry. This is Studio 2, and unlike Studio 1, which is designed mainly for classical music recording, this is designed mainly for pop music recording. And hence, the equipment that we have in here is very different, as is the acoustics of the studio floor through the glass there. So the centre of this room is this large analogue inline console made by SSL. And the reason why we have this is because this is the kind of thing that you will still find in the top pop studios in the country. In fact, Abbey Road Studio 3 has a console almost identical to this, but of course theirs is slightly larger than this one. We couldn't fit theirs in between the walls. Similarly, the equipment that we record to in here, we use mainly Pro Tools, but we can also record using Logic, again because these are most widely used in industry for pop music recording. So when we're making a recording in here, we'd position the musicians on the studio floor. We might record them individually, so we might start with the drums and record that, and then the bass, and then work our way through the band. But the studio floor is big enough that you can put all the musicians there to record the whole band at once, if that's the kind of production you want to do. So we position the microphones on the studio floor and plug them into the wall boxes in there, and those signals then come along cables underneath the floor into this patch bay here. And from here we can route them to anywhere on this console, but we can also route them to anywhere pretty much in the building. So again, we can link all the studios together if we want to do that. This is a large inline analog console, and to get started with, it is very complicated. But the reason why we have this is that once you've got a good grip of this, once you know how to use this really well, you can take those procedures, those workflows that you have developed on this console and apply it to almost any other analog desk that's out there. So a lot of the large analog consoles, whether those are SSLs or Neves, will work in a very similar way. But it's easier to go from a large complex desk like this down to something much smaller and simpler, the kind of things that you might have in a production suite or in a small studio. But if you've only ever used digital consoles or you've only ever used small analog consoles, it's incredibly difficult to move from that up to this style of console. So that's why the equipment that we have, it's representative of the top professional equipment that you would find out there. By learning how to use the wide range of equipment we have, you're in a really good position to be able to go into almost any studio space and have a really good idea of where to start. It means that you'll be much more adaptable, much more able in your future career, and that means you'll go on to all sorts of amazing things. In here, we run various seminars on recording for the students. So part of it is in the first year, as part of the practical skills module, you'll be taught how to use a large analog console like this. But we also run seminars and workshops for students in the second and final year, which are trying to get you to experience a wider range of things. And these are led either by lecturers and tutors who teach on the course, or by visiting professionals who come in from industry to give you the benefit of their experience of projects that you may have been working on even the day before. One of the great projects that we do in here is we have what we call a live lounge session. So a bit like the BBC live lounge sessions, we have some musicians that we hire who will be in the studio floor, and at the start of the hour, students are brought in here and the microphones will be on stands, but nothing else will be rigged. So it's really great exercise to try and get as good a sound in the limited amount of time you've got. So it's run as a live lounge. You have 50 minutes in order to meet the musicians, make them comfortable, rig all the microphones, plug everything in and get the sound sorted. And then we have a big clock that we put in here, which is counting down. And after 50 minutes, whether you're ready or not, you're effectively live on air. Apart from the few hours a week that we run our seminars and teaching sessions in here, the rest of the time, these studios are bookable by tonmeisters to make recordings. So you will get a quota of studio time each semester, and it's up to you to decide what you record. So that might be from ensembles who write to the department regularly wanting demos made, or it might be friends, or it might be ensembles you already know, or you might go out to gigs in London or around Guildford and find bands that you'd like to work with, that you'd like to record, you'd like to help produce and put demos together, and those are the kind of things that you can go and record as part of the course. During the course, we insist that you have a wide range of experience. So for instance, in the final year, you have to hand in as part of your portfolio a classical edit, a location recording and a pop mix down. And that's to ensure that you have a wide range of experience. But beyond that, it's entirely up to you what you record, what styles you record, what instrumentation you record. And so the idea is that at the end of the course, you hand in your CD portfolio of about half an hour long that represents you as a recording engineer. And if in that you wish to specialise in a particular genre or a particular area, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to carry on experimenting with a wide range of musical styles and doing all sorts of weird and wonderful projects, again, that's absolutely fine. The idea is that you can take advantage of all the brilliant opportunities that we have here to learn all of these fantastic kit, to find out as much as you can about different styles of music and different ways of recording in a way that will be most suitable to your career aspirations and where you want to take your career in the future. This is Studio 2 floor, and as you can hear, it's a very different acoustical space compared to Studio 1 floor, and that's because it's designed for a different style of music. So Studio 1 is designed for classical music, and it's designed to sound as if you would expect a small performance space for classical music to sound. There's lots of hard surfaces, the sound bounces around, so you get a natural reverberation of something a bit like a small concert hall. In here, on the other hand, we have absorption on the floors, on the walls and on the ceiling. And the idea behind this is to try and capture the sound rather than having it bouncing around. Because when we have, say, a pop band playing in here all at once, if the sound was being bounced back off all the surfaces, that means you get much more spill. You have much more, for instance, of the drums being picked up on the guitar mic. By having a relatively dead studio floor in here, it means you've got much more control over the separation between the different instruments. And that means when it comes to mix the things you've recorded, you've got much more freedom, much more flexibility in order to do creative things, to add exciting reverbs and things like that that you might want to add, or to do all sorts of different processing which is separate for each of the different instruments. So here's some examples of work recorded by students as part of the course. Even though most of the equipment for this studio is in the control room, there's still a lot of useful equipment that's in here, whether it's simple things like lots of microphone stands, or whether it's acoustic screens, so to help you get more separation between the different microphones and the different instruments. We've also got an upright piano in here for recording piano parts. We've got a pork pie drum kit that we can use. Some drummers would prefer to bring their own kits, some would prefer to use the ones that are in here. And then we've got a range of bass and guitar amps for bands to use. Of course, bands don't have to use the equipment that we've got here. They can bring their own instruments, they can bring their own amps. And one of the things that we do as part of the course is teach you how to electrically safety test equipment. So that means when a band comes in and brings their guitar amp or their keyboard, you can test it to make sure that it's safe, to make sure that it's not going to electrocute them or even worse, you. But that's yet another thing which is really useful from the course, because in industry, electrical safety testing is something which has to be done regularly. So by having learnt how to do that here, it's yet another skill that you've developed that will be useful in your professional careers. The workflow for recording a pop track these days often needs lots and lots of editing. So it may be that you recorded your band as live in here, but then you need to do some tweaks to try and make it sound even better. And that might be something like putting a few notes of the bassist back into time. It might be tuning the vocals. It might even be, trying to knock that dodgy brass section back into shape. So generally we would record something in this studio and then we'd take the project, take those files that are recorded into one of the edit rooms to do that fine tuning, that finessing, to make the recorded product as good as it possibly can be. And often trying to make an illusion of something which never quite happened in reality, but could be even better than that. So now we'll go off and see the edit rooms. This is one of 5 edit rooms that we have available for students to use. And like the other facilities, they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We call these rooms edit rooms because that's their primary purpose. They're here to do editing of things that have been recorded elsewhere. Now, some of the rooms, particularly this one, has a mixing desk in here. It has tie lines to link to other areas, so you could record multi-track audio in here if you wished to. But we call it an edit room because that's mainly what it's intended for. So it may be something that you've recorded, for instance, in Studio One. You've done a classical recording session. Now, most classical recordings aren't just one take where the performer starts at the beginning and plays it all the way through perfectly to the end. More often than not, in fact almost always, that performance will be made up of a number of sections because, for whatever reasons, the performer hasn't been able to play it all the way through exactly as well as they are able to. So usually we have takes, lots of sections of this music, and we bring that into an editing system in here. It might be Pro Tools as shown here, or it might be Pyramix, or we might even use Logic in these edit rooms. And what we're doing is putting all of those sections back together. We're finding the best takes of each of the sections, putting it together to put it back into a complete musical piece, which sounds better than it was ever performed in reality. A similar thing would happen with popular music. You would record your pop tracks in the studio and then you bring those files into here to edit them. Whether that's putting the drummer slightly back into time, whether that's tuning the vocal. Again, often a vocal take will be made up of lots and lots of different recordings where perhaps you're even using single words or phrases from different takes and putting them together to make a complete musical phrase, a complete performance that's better than the artist actually did in reality. Usually you would edit things in here, so keep all of the separate tracks, which you could then take into the studios to mix down. But you could do mixing in here. Again, we have here a mixing desk that you could use for mixing in here. You could mix it within the computer-based system itself, and some of our other edit rooms have fader controllers to help you with that. Or you can do the editing here and take it back to the studios to do the final mix. Often when you've done the mix in the studios and you have your final 2-channel, usually stereo mix, you might want to bring it back into the edit rooms again just to do some final mastering. That is doing some final processing just to correct for maybe some little errors you made, or just do a little bit of sweetening to make it sound as good as it possibly can be before you do that final release. Also, the software that we've got in here, you can use to make CDs to a professional standard. So the kind of software that comes with computer operating systems these days, you can put the disc in and burn audio onto it and make an audio CD. But the kind of professional software that we've got here gives you much more control over things like when the tracks start and end, how the pauses work between the tracks, whether there's countdowns or count-ups to all the different track starts. And so it gives you a lot more control to do things in a clever and musically appropriate way. This is our technical store, and this is where we keep all of the portable pieces of equipment. So for instance, microphones and cameras and cables are all held here. So if you are planning, for instance, a pop session, you would firstly find out what instrumentation you want to record. From that, you'll work out which microphones you'll choose from this wide range that we've got here. And it may be that you have particular favourite microphones you always want to use, but this gives you the opportunity to try all sorts of different things. You can try different techniques, you can try different types of microphones, you can find out what works well in particular situations, or perhaps work out a bit more about when things won't work so well so you can avoid it in future. So on our online booking system, you would reserve the microphones and you come to the store to book them out. Last time I counted, we had over 120 microphones of different types, and it really covers pretty much every type of microphone you can think of. We have various dynamic mics, condenser mics, ribbon mics. We have every directivity pattern you could possibly think of. We have all sorts of esoteric mics like sound fields or second and third order ambisonic microphones. And we have really the kind of microphones that you would see in almost any kind of recording session. And our microphones, because we've been collecting them for so many years, go all the way back to the 1960s. We have some very rare valve 1960s microphones that are worth a lot of money these days. But we also have, latest examples of things that we bought last year. So it really covers a wide range of things. And again, like all of the equipment that we have, gives you the opportunity to try out a wide range of things in order that you can find out what works best for you. And maybe you can come up with some exciting new ways of recording things that nobody's ever even thought of. In here, we also have location recording equipment, which is equipment that you can book out to take out in one of the two vans we have to go and make a recording that might be in a concert hall or might be in a church or pretty much any venue you can find in order to record a band or an ensemble. So as part of that, we have speaker sets that you can take with you. We have mixing desks you can take, the multi-cores and all the cabling and the stands and everything else that you would need to do recording on location. And this recording on location is a really important thing to learn. It's one thing to go into a studio that's already set up and make a recording in a controlled environment. It's a very different thing if you have to go into a church and make a temporary control room in whatever room you can find that's available, usually somewhere around the back of the vestry. So by learning how to do that, by learning how to get around all of the challenges that result from that, again, it makes you much more adaptable. It means you can turn your hand to a much wider range of practical work. This is Studio 3. This is designed for mixing things that have been recorded and edited elsewhere. So it might be that, for instance, you record a classical session in Studio 1, you would then take that into the edit rooms and put together all of the many takes that your artist may have had to do in order to get everything played as well as they possibly can. And then you'd bring the files into here to mix down all of the separate microphone feeds into usually 2-channel stereo, but you can also mix in 5.1 in this room if you want to do that instead. Or it may be, for instance, a pop track that you recorded in Studio 2. And again, you've taken it to the edit rooms to tidy up the parts, to try and make it as good as it possibly can be. And then you bring it here to mix all of those separate files into the stereo final track. Or it might even be something that you've recorded on location. So we have 2 vans that you can borrow. We have a wide range of location recording equipment, such as pairs of loudspeakers, mixing desks, multi-cores, all of the kind of things you need to go make a recording somewhere in a concert hall or in a church. And again, you can bring the files into here in order to mix things down to make that final stereo mix. This room does have a small overdub booth behind me, which we designed to be too small to record drums in, but people have still managed it. So that's really intended for recording things like extra guitar parts or vocal overdubs, backing vocals and that kind of thing. But again, students use these studios in all sorts of ways. So there have been plenty of sessions where the musicians have been set up in the control room behind the mixing desk position. And it's the kind of thing that you would do in a large studio such as Real World. I mean, that's very well known for having a very large control room where the musicians can be positioned in the control room. It's a different way of working. It means you have less separation from the musicians. It means you don't have the freedom to keep tweaking the sound whilst they're playing through their parts. But on the other hand, it's a much closer way of working. You get much more interaction with the musicians. So some prefer to do it that way. So again, we have examples of where people have rigged drums in here or various instruments and recorded in here. The centre of this room is this AMS Neve 88D recording console. And the reason why we selected this for this room is because it introduces you to a lot of workflows and techniques that are so important if you go and work in either film recording or film mixing or music recording. So for instance, the automation system on this, how you can control those faders and all those knobs and record that information in order that it's reproduced. That's the same across all of AMS Neve's consoles. So once you've learnt how to use the automation on this desk, you have a good idea how to use the automation on the kind of desks that you'll find, for instance, in Abbey Road Studio 1 or in Air Lyndhurst Big Hall, because they're all based on the same AMS Neve Encore automation system. Similarly, the workflow structure of this desk in terms of how you create the signal path through it and the options you have in configuring the desk and its digital signal processing operations is the same on this desk as across Neve's film mixing consoles. So again, by learning how to use this and how to get the most out of it, it prepares you for going to work in big film studios or big film dubbing theatres such as Delane Lee, such as Pinewood, such as Shepperton, all of which have recording desks and mixing dubbing desks that are very similar in operation to this. So again, as with all of the equipment that we have picked it because it's representative of what's used in industry. You've got a tremendous opportunity here to use lots of recording equipment which is worth literally millions of pounds and is really the highest end of what you can buy and therefore appears in the kind of high-end studios that ideally, I guess, you would like to go and work in. So by using these, by learning how to use these, it's easier then to move down to simpler equipment. But if you didn't have the opportunity to learn how to use this kind of equipment, it's much more difficult to make that transition from just, for instance, using a computer with an interface on it up to using a large analog or digital console, such as the ones we have here at Surrey. Most of the audio that you'll reproduce in here comes from the computer-based system. So we have Pro Tools on the screen at the moment, but we also have Pyramix running in this room. So you can import your sessions from the other studios into here and start mixing straight away. But as well as the digital signal processing that we have in the computer and in the console, we also have a wide range of outboard gear. Things that we've selected that we think are particularly interesting or have a particularly unique sound or are very common in the industry. Again, the idea being that you can learn how to use these. You can learn what you can do, what you can't do with these, and get used to the different types of equipment that you will find in industry. And also, it gives you lots of options in order to help sculpt your sound as part of your learning how to make your recordings, your mixers, sound as good as they can be. Another piece of coursework that you do is on sound for picture. So there's a lot of jobs in either TV or film, and it's useful to learn the techniques and the kind of roles and what you would need to do in order to create that kind of work. So we give you the footage, the video, we give you some of the location sound, so that would be the sounds of the actors. We give you some additional dialogue recording, so those are parts where the actors have recorded their voice parts again later on because there were maybe some problems with the sound on set. And then it's up to you to fit all that together, to mix it, to select which parts of additional dialogue versus the set dialogue you're going to use, and then add all of the rest of the sound effects and music that would happen in a piece of proper broadcast television. The recording work that you do is supported by regular listening seminars. And so, for instance, in the first year, we do ear training, both in terms of technical audio ear training, learning how to identify faults, learning how to identify different characteristics of audio, so that your hearing and your perception and your recognition all improve. Because let's be honest, one of the most important tools that you have as an audio engineer is your ears. So the better you can get at listening and identifying faults, the much more useful you will be. We also train you in musical oral skills. So that is learning how to listen to music and firstly follow a score, secondly to mark up a score so you know which takes there were when you come back to edit it later, but also the skills in being able to identify the notes, the tunes, the melodies, the chords, so that when somebody performs a section of some music, you have a reasonable idea of what went well, what didn't go well, were there any wrong notes, were there any things where the interpretation could have been better, so that you can work as a producer and liaise with the musician in order that they either re-record sections that didn't go quite so well or give them advice of ways that they could perform it even better than they're already doing. Into the second year and the final year, we give you lots of feedback on your recorded work. So each week you'll have a listening seminar, usually in here, where you bring things that you've recorded and you play it back to whoever the lecturer is or the visiting tutor who's running that session, and to your colleagues, and talk about what you did and how you did it, and then get feedback both from your colleagues and from the members of staff about, well, what else could you have tried? How could it have gone better? How can you adapt or tweak or modify what you've done to make it sound even better? What's good about what you're doing in terms of recordings? What could you get even better at? So to summarise, why do I think that you might want to come and study on the Tom Meister course at the University of Surrey, particularly from the point of view of the operational work that you'll do and the facilities? Well, there's lots of reasons. Firstly, in terms of the facilities you get to use, we've designed these studios from the ground up to be, as you would expect, a top professional high-end studio to be. So it's not that we've taken a broom cupboard and put an Apple Mac in it and written studio on the door. In terms of the way everything is configured, it's to a high professional standard. In terms of the equipment that you get to use as well, it's the kind of equipment that you would expect to find in top professional studios. And unless you're incredibly fortunate, it's probably not the kind of equipment that you will be able to own yourself. But there's lots of other reasons why it might be a good idea to come and study the Tom Meister course at Surrey. For instance, the kind of people you will meet during the course, whether that's the members of staff who teach the practical side of the course, who have had very long and very distinguished careers in the audio industry, or whether that's the visiting staff who come in to give workshops, seminars, tutorials, to talk about the latest techniques and up-to-date sessions, whatever it was maybe they were working on last week, and to give you lots of helpful advice in terms of how you go about making recordings, but also feedback on your recordings and how good they are and maybe how they could be improved. We also have very good contacts with industry. That's both in terms of the placement scheme, so the kind of placement employers that you could go and work for in your placement year include the high-end studios and broadcasters that you may hope to work for once you've graduated. People like Abbey Road Studios or Real World or Air Studios. On the broadcast side, companies like Sky or the BBC. In terms of manufacturing, it may be companies like Bang & Olufsen. Computer games, we've had people placed at Electronic Arts. There are lots of things that you can go on to do having done the Tom Meister course, not just on the practical side. And finally, we're very fortunate that we can keep the course small and high quality. We only take a relatively small number of students each year compared to a lot of the courses out there. That means that firstly, you get lots of time in these studios. These studios are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, apart from the few hours they use for seminars, and you'll get plenty of time in here to try them out, to learn how to use them, to hone your craft as you go through the course. But it also means that there's a very friendly feel in the course. It's a small year group each year, so that means everybody gets to know each other. It's a really good community that's built up. And actually, often you find as you wander around the building, at least in normal circumstances, there are lots of Tom Meisters hanging around, talking to each other, learning from each other. And it's a really good place to be from a personal point of view, not just your educational opportunities. The final reason why I think that you might want to come and do the Tom Meister course at Surrey is that the range of jobs you can go into is huge, and our graduates go on to really fantastic things. So as part of the course, you'll study music, you'll study engineering, and you'll study the operational and practical side. So on the musical side, you can go on to a musical career, whether that's being a performer or whether that's being a composer or an arranger. You could go into an engineering role, whether that's designing equipment for companies like Focusrite, or you could go into a recording or mixing role. And again, that covers a whole wide range of things, whether that's music, recording, producing, engineering, whether that's film music or film sound, which could be recording or mixing or composing or editing, or it could be in TV sound. There's a whole wide range of different roles that you can go on to from the course. So, I hope you found this video interesting and useful. Please use the links that are shown here of our students' recordings. They're also in the links down below in the description for this video, so you can listen to a lot more work that our students have done. And also, if you look on our channel, we've got links to a lot more student work and student interviews and things like that. To find out more, please go to our website. Thank you.